Good morning. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for helping to keep Pennsylvania's voters informed. We're less than 3 weeks from the November 7th municipal election in Pennsylvania. Before answering any questions, I want to take a few moments to discuss the importance of this election and some election-related deadlines. The Shapiro administration is committed to ensuring that every election in Pennsylvania is free and fair and safe and secure. That commitment includes protecting Pennsylvanians' right to vote, improving the efficiency and transparency of our elections, and ensuring every eligible ballot is counted. As a former local election official, I know firsthand how hard poll workers and county election officials work to enable every eligible voter to cast their vote. But to vote in Pennsylvania, you must first register to vote. And the deadline to register to vote in this upcoming election is October 23rd, which is only 4 days away. Fortunately, eligible Pennsylvanians can choose from multiple ways to register to vote, including doing so online at vote.pa.gov or in person at their county election office. To make voter registration even more accessible to eligible Pennsylvanians, the Shapiro administration implemented automatic voter registration 1 month ago today. This common sense measure enables Pennsylvanians to more easily register to vote when they apply for or renew their driver's license or get a PennDOT ID at their local PennDOT center. Although AVR has been in effect for only a few weeks, I'd like to share a high-level comparison with motor voter registration applications from the same period in 2021, which was the last non-federal election cycle. Since September 19th of this year, AVR has resulted in 11,303 new voter registrations. That compares to 7,323 new voter registrations for the same period in 2021 through Motor Voter. And typically, there's a lag in processing automatic voter registrations that come from PennDOT to the county level. So that number should be higher than that when comparing to the next sort of 4 weeks ahead. But registering to vote is only the first step to participating in our democratic republic. The next step is to actually cast your ballot. Traditionally, municipal elections, like the one on November 7th, attract lower voter turnout than midterm or presidential elections. I'd like to see us reverse that trend because arguably the outcome of a municipal election has a far greater impact on the average life of a voter. On November 7th, Pennsylvanians will elect school board members in some counties who set their property tax rates, municipal and county elections or officials who will make local public safety and infrastructure decisions, and local and statewide judges who interpret Pennsylvania's laws. Pennsylvanians have several options available to them for voting in this election. They can vote by no-excuse mail-in ballot. The deadline to apply for a mail-in ballot is October 31st, but it is important to apply as soon as you're able and not wait until the deadline so you have sufficient time to receive, complete, and return your ballot. As of this morning, counties have received 938,110 mail-in ballot applications for the November 7th election. Completed mail ballots must be returned to county election offices by 8 p.m. on election day. Mail ballots received after that time are not counted, even if they contain a postmark before the deadline. Pennsylvanians can also vote by mail ballot in person at their county election office through October 31st, the deadline. They can apply for, receive, complete, and return their ballot all in the same visit. And of course, Pennsylvanians can vote in person at the polls on Election Day from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. Whichever option you choose, make sure to cast your ballot and make your voice heard. Finally, as we approach Election Day, it's important that voters have timely, reliable information from sources they trust. The Department of State's website and county election office websites are the best sources for information about elections in Pennsylvania. I recommend bookmarking the department's website, vote.pa.gov, so it is readily available for users. I encourage any Pennsylvanian with questions about where their polling place is, or where their county election office is, or what the important election deadlines are to visit vote.pa.gov. They can also call our year-round voting information hotline at 1-866-VOTES-PA, V-O-T-E-S-P-A, which provides interpretation services in more than 200 languages. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Jen.
I was wondering if you could provide a partisan breakdown for the new AVR registrations, and then also how many of the mail-in ballots that folks had applied for have been received back at this point?
For partisan breakdown, I don't have that yet. I only have new registration figures. I mean, for us, obviously, the most important thing is to make sure eligible voters can register to vote. It takes considerable work to get to those numbers. If you think about it, these are applications that come from PennDOT out to 67 counties, get processed by 67 counties, and then for us to query those applications after they've gone through that whole system to see whether they are new, whether they're change of address, change of name, change of party, or anything else. So at this point, I only have new registration figures for you, because that was certainly our focus and most important thing. The most important thing is that voters eligible, regardless of how they register to vote, do register to vote. And the Shapiro administration's step to implement automatic voter registration will, as we've seen already, have a significant impact in registering eligible voters.
Do you have any numbers on the completed return mail-in ballots?
I can get those for you. I think they're between maybe 10 and 15% at this point. But most mail-in ballots really only go out in, let's say, 30 days before Election Day, and most are returned in the week or so leading up to the election. So regardless of when ballots come out, they all tend to come back in the lead up to the election. So I wouldn't be alarmed by that figure. Tom.
John Erickson with ABC 27. This is a question from Dennis Owens, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, so bear with me for a second. So I guess there have been a couple of snafus, hiccups in terms of distribution of mail-in ballots. Some were too heavy. Some gave the wrong instructions in terms of the color of an envelope, like which one to send back, I guess. And so given these snafus and counties dealing with this on a county-by-county basis, has there been any consideration by the state to do a standardized ballot across the board for all 67 counties? Is that something that's been talked about? Is that something that's possible? Can that happen?
Well, one thing that we've seen, not just in the Commonwealth, but across the country, is a considerable number of election administrators with a lot of years of experience retiring or leaving those positions. Whenever that happens, it makes it more likely that errors like the ones you described will occur. It's important for us to keep in mind that they are not deliberate, they are not intentional, they are not seeking to change the outcome of an election. Any of these errors that I hear about as a former county election administrator, really, it's upsetting, because I know what it must be like, and they are committed to having their voters' votes counted. The most important things for the counties to do when they are aware of an error is everything they can to make sure those voters are notified and that those voters can cast a vote and have that vote counted, whether it's resending out those ballots if there is an error in the instructions or an error on the ballot or anything else like that, to make sure there's a remedy so that that voter can still cast their vote. Pennsylvania, the Department of State works with the counties. We work closely with the counties. We want to be a resource to the counties. We, for example, proof their federal election offices. We proof statewide or state election offices. But it's really for the counties to proof their county level offices and the multitude of candidates and offices running in each of our 67 counties. But we want to be a resource to them. We will help them in any way that we possibly can to overcome challenges like this when they occur or to prevent them from happening at all.
There's been questions over the last few years about ballots that I guess don't have necessarily a clean date, or the envelopes, I should say, for the mail-in ballots. Can you go over really quick, just if voters are sending in their mail ballot, what has to be on that mail envelope in order to make sure it counts?
I think, the number of stories and things about this, I don't want voters to have the impression that voting by mail is a complicated process. It is not. There are instructions that lay out what is required. A couple of those things are required. For the ballot to be returned in the secrecy envelope, and the secrecy envelope to be returned in a declaration envelope. So you put your ballot in the secrecy envelope that's clearly marked. You put that in the declaration envelope. And that the voter signs and dates the ballot. The law says, as written, that the ballot should be signed and dated by the voter. It's a frustration that ballots that aren't hand-dated by the voter aren't counted. Boards of elections know when they mail that ballot out. They know when they got it back, and they timestamp it. So if you have an elderly voter who writes their birthday on that ballot, it's pretty terrible that we can't count those ballots at present. But the law as written is clear and says the voter must sign and date the ballot. There's still litigation regarding that. We'll see how that shakes out at the federal level. But when a voter returns their ballot, it's important that they sign and date the declaration envelope. Jen.
How confident are you that the counties will uniformly handle the ballot curing process?
So every county in Pennsylvania follows the same election code. But there's a lot of flexibility, since elections are really run at the county level in Pennsylvania, for counties to determine, in working with their city solicitor and their board of elections, how to administer that election. And some of that is for good reason. The challenges you face in Philadelphia County are considerably different than the challenges you face in Elk County or Juniata County or some other. So that flexibility is there for a reason. But what we want to avoid are situations where a type of ballot is counted in one county and that same ballot is not counted in some other county. We want as much uniformity as possible when it comes to what ballots are counted and what aren't counted. The Department of State provides guidance, formal guidance. The Department of State provides directives when it can to instruct counties how to best handle counting of ballots, what processes they need to take in order to process those ballots. But Board of Elections, in working with their county solicitors, do make decisions at the county level that might come to a different conclusion than some other county. So it's important that we do whatever we can to promote as much uniformity as we possibly can, but still allow counties the flexibility that they need to do what's best for their voters in their counties.
One of the other issues that has arisen a couple of years ago was just the last-minute guidance that the department shared with counties. Now, I realize you can't anticipate all the problems that can come up at the last minute, but I mean, do you have like a deadline of, okay, at this point, we're not going to tell counties this is what you got to do?
Yeah, it was a real frustration for me as well, running elections. So one thing that we did earlier this year was put in place essentially a deadline for issuing guidance, which was 45 days before the election, which we did the other day by that deadline. There are certain things, as you mentioned, that are not under our control. Court decisions that really compel us to issue further guidance or directives within that 45-day window are inevitable. So for us, when we do have those decisions, it's really a matter of responding expeditiously to make sure that we can issue it as quickly as possible, because election administrators need time to really implement any changes that occur in the lead up to an election.
Secretary?
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, Senate State Government Committee had a hearing about pulling out of ERIC. Secretaries from Florida and Ohio testified how they pulled out. If the Commonwealth would pull out of it and not participate, how would that adverse what your office does, and what's your thoughts about responsibility of pulling out?
Withdrawing from ERIC would have a negative impact on election integrity in Pennsylvania. As you've seen with the other states that have withdrawn from ERIC, and again, ERIC is not a private organization. It is not some shadowy third-party organization. ERIC is made up of the member states who belong to this information sharing agreement to identify, for example, voters who might be registered in more than one state. It is a very valuable tool to safeguard election integrity. As you've seen, states that have withdrawn are sort of scrambling to figure out how to fill that void. There have been attempts to do this in the past outside of the ERIC framework. They have all failed. They've resulted in considerable litigation. They risk exposing personal identifiable information of voters. And it is a real challenge that those states face that have withdrawn from ERIC. I know from working at the county level as well, the information we provide is really that ERIC provides is really critical to identify cases where you might have some voter move from Pennsylvania to New Jersey. They don't do a forwarding address. They don't, like most people don't, cancel their voter registration where they lived before. And the ERIC system allows us to be notified when a voter moves, for example, among other things, from one state to another, so that our counties can then reach out or send out a letter to that voter to confirm that they've moved elsewhere, and if they have, cancel their voter registration.
And one of the things that brought up is the cost that the state pays to participate in the ERIC system. Do you have an estimate of what the cost is?
It is relatively not significant. The benefit that we get from it is far greater than, I think last year we paid a little over $70,000 a year, I believe, to be a part of the ERIC system. That is far less than hiring one data analyst to try to do that work in-house with benefits and sort of all the rest. And they still wouldn't be able to do it because you still don't have access to other states' information in a safe and secure way. When you have these states making agreements with one another, it raises considerable problems. If they're either sharing information that's already publicly available, and it's hard to make data matches based on how many John Smiths there are with the birthday of January 23rd in one state and another state. So you're going to get a lot of bad data, or you have to share personally identifiable information with one another. Right now, the states that belong to ERIC all share it to one system. These unilateral agreements result in states sharing that data with one another. So information from Pennsylvania's voters would be given to some other state in these other mechanisms they're trying to construct. And if it includes personally identifiable information, that's a real concern. The real perversity of it is ERIC is such a valuable resource for safeguarding election integrity, and the states that have withdrawn from it lose out on that and are obviously trying to figure out ways to provide for it.
Since we broached this subject, I was just curious, has Pennsylvania entered into any of these memorandums of understanding with other states, or are you willing to enter into such agreements?
There's only been a few. I'm not aware of any states actually even reaching the point of sharing information. The MOUs, at least the ones that I've seen, are really very basic. They request information from other states that is already publicly available for $20 to get the export voter file to use for those purposes. So the MOUs themselves, I mean, we'll see how all of that develops. But in the meantime, election integrity in Pennsylvania is not compromised because we haven't drawn from Eric. And I think that's absolutely the right decision.
If I recall, I mean, your one request to the legislature with regard to Eric is to use the death records that we don't use now to try to clear the dead people off our voter rolls.
That's right. Right now, the Pennsylvania Election Code really only allows counties to cancel voters' records when they're deceased, if they receive a notice from the Department of Health, or a couple other minor exceptions. The ERIC system, if you're allowed to make full use of the information, would allow you, if the records indicate you've moved from Pennsylvania to New Jersey and you pass away in New Jersey, for Pennsylvania to be notified and to cancel that voter after doing sort of due diligence. You don't just cancel a voter. You don't mark their status as inactive for no good reason. It takes interaction with the voter and confirmation that those records should be canceled. There's even more information that ERIC provides that we could make use of to further strengthen election integrity.
We have time for one more question.
All right, thank you all. And as I said in the beginning, we want to play an important role in keeping voters informed, and I really appreciate the role that you play as well in keeping them informed.